Happy Saturday, guys. Today I'm just going to get on here and I'm just going to talk. I'll tell you honestly, I just got on here and I don't really know exactly what I'm going to talk about. But I have an idea what I want to talk about. I want to talk about 2008 a little bit. And, you know, what happened? The system started to actually fold up in 2008. They had to start liquidating things on a market-to-market basis, mark-to-market basis. And here's the thing. They saw, after 2008, they saw that mark-to-market and liquidation and margin call, what it can do. They saw that. And so they tried to correct the problem. But when it comes right down to it, ultimately, when things start to fold in, fear hits the markets, liquidation will begin, and I don't care what laws they put in place. When a guy wants his money, I remember there was some sort of a rappers did this rap song not long ago. It went like something, "Where's my money?" or something like that. "Where's my money?" And that's how it went, you know. And "Where's my money?" And when people start to liquidate and stuff, and one guy, he's going to want his money. He don't care what law is in place. They can put all the laws that they want in place that things are not going to work on a mark-to-market basis. But ultimately, that's how the basic fundamental of the market works is, if a guy's owed money, he's going to go and get it. And he's going to be like, you sell what you got and pay me. Pay me now. When the system starts folding in, because I'm going under. And it's a bunch of sharks, ultimately, when it comes down to it. And any law that they put in to try to stop that is going to be null and void. They might as well not even waste their breath. And I know that they saw the mistake of mark-to-market, what it can do in 2008. And they'll try to put in laws to suppress that so that it won't happen. A 2008 situation won't happen again. They try to inject liquidity into the banking system so that the 2008 crisis won't happen again. They say, okay, we're going to do stress tests on the banks to make sure the banks have adequate liquidity. But now, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of this. That liquidity that they use to pass the stress tests, I don't care. It's tier 1 liquidity. It doesn't matter to me. You got to understand how banks create liquidity. And the liquidity in the structure of the bank. A bank is insolvent even if they've got a lot of tier 1 liquidity, if they have got an awful lot of non-performing loans out there that outweigh their liquidity that they have on board. In other words, if they got a whole bunch of non-performing loans, I don't care if they can pass a stress test. I don't care if they've got a lot of tier 1 liquidity in place. If they've got 10 times outstanding loans that have just went poof into thin air, and the guys aren't going to pay them back ever, suddenly they're in trouble. They're insolvent on a mark-to-market basis. Here's the thing. The banking structure as it is right now, what they've all done is they've become like a giant mass of Proteus. A giant mass, they're like a giant scab. That's the way I'm putting it. What they've done is they've connected themselves all together with these, they're like a big cancer. They've interconnected themselves through the derivatives, chains of derivatives. Now, Deutsche Bank, we found that Deutsche Bank quite recently has been getting in trouble. They're slowly sliding down the slippery slope to hell. Over in Europe, they've put a law in place called the B-A-A-R-D. I think it's B-A-A-R-D. I researched it anyway. It's the equivalent of similar laws that they've passed in Canada and in the United States, and in fact, in Australia and every country on earth, where the banks can do what's called a bail-in. So there's two things. Now, I get them confused quite often, bail-in, bail-out. But bail-in is basically where they steal your money. Just think of it that way. In, if it says in, bail-in, the in part means that they're going to steal your money. It's basically theft. Basically what it boils down to. And how, if you understand how the banking system creates money in the first place is it's a one-way valve. It's like, okay, picture it this way. You got water, a water system. If any of you guys put water systems in, you know that sometimes they use, or fuel systems for, say, a vehicle or something. Sometimes they use what's called a one-way valve. It'll let the fluid go through one direction, but it won't work in the opposite direction. It'll stop the fuel from going back. So you can go one way, you can pass. Thou shall pass this way. But then you want to go back, and you say, no, you're not going back. Stop, you're not going back. That's a one-way valve. You know? So the banks, their money creation tool is like a one-way valve. Fractional reserve banking can create money if they're lending money out. But they just can't arbitrarily say, hey, you know what? We're insolvent now because on a whole bunch of our loans have decided that they're not going to come back to us, and we have a whole bunch of what's called non-performing loans. It means the performance has got to do with the people paying the bank back. So basically a non-performing loan means that these people are not paying us back. And you get a whole bunch of non-performing loans. This is what just recently happened in Italy to the Italian banks. It's well and fine to lend the people the money. The bank makes money because what they do is, say they're lending $100,000. They write that $100,000 on the slip, and they just created it from nothing. So that's the one-way valve. They're able to create money if the money's going out from the bank to the people who's borrowing the money. So if they borrow $100,000, they write $100,000, the bank does, on their ledger. Now, the bank is able to figure out how much interest they're going to make during the term of the loan. Say it's 10 years, 10%. They're able to figure that interest out, too, and add that to the $100,000, and then they're able to add that whole thing to credit to the bank. That's their credit. That is the money that the banks have. This is where they got their money, from making loans. So you see these banks out there, and suddenly the bank says, okay, we made $5 billion profit this year. That means that they've loaned out $5 billion to a whole bunch of people. Now, what happens if all those loans become non-performing, the people are not paying them back? What happens? Well, that's a one-way valve. The bank cannot create money to cover that. The bank, once they write that on their book, that money springs into existence. Now, suddenly, if it's non-performing, the bank owes that money. So instead of becoming a credit to the bank, suddenly it's a liability or a debt to the bank because the guy's not paying them back. So see how quickly this can make a bank insolvent? Just a few of these non-performing loans? Because now where do they get the money to cover these non-performing loans? The fact is their money creation tool does not work in that direction. It's only a one-way valve. It doesn't work both ways. It doesn't cover that money. Suddenly the banking system. So the banks have realized this, and what they've done is they've all linked themselves in together with these derivative chains and stuff, like a giant mass, like a giant Proteus, like a giant scab. Okay? They've linked themselves in. And so that way they can hold each other up. If one bank doesn't succeed in their loans and people don't pay them back, the other banks can hold them up. Plus, they've decided that they need something more to hold them up, if the banking system. And what more is the government. Now, the government can create money and pump it into the bank and that's called a bail-in. Oh, a bailout. It's called a bailout. Told you I'd get them mixed up, sorry. That's called a bailout, when the government just gives the bank money. But the government now has to say, okay, where are we going to get that money back? The government now suddenly is in debt because they just created that money, and the taxpayer is owing that money. Now, this is what happened in 2008. Now you got a gist of what happened in 2008 and why the United States government is so deep in debt. To the tune of, they're so deep in debt to the tune of $21 trillion in debt and counting. This is why, because they've bailed out all the banks. The banks are criminals. Simply put, they're criminals. They're criminal organizations. They can create money in this one direction, but not in the other direction. So the government bails them out. What do they do with that bailout money? You want to know? Suddenly the government gives them a big lump of money, generally 10 times more than they actually needed to bail out the bank in the first place. They just add it on the tab, just like a guy goes into a bar. He says to a bartender, he says, "Throw it on my tab, Jim." And that's what the government does. Throw it on our tab, you know. So what? It's another trillion. Trillion here, trillion there. And it's nothing. So they give the banker 10 times what he needs to pay off the non-performing loans. So they go out and they take 1/10 of the money they just got in the bail-in, or bailout, I should say, and they apply it to the non-performing loans. Then the other 90% of the money, guess what? One banker says, well, we're going to have bonuses this year. Bonuses all around. $100,000 for every bank. Well, not the tellers, hold on, not the tellers. They don't get the $100,000 bonus. We give them $1,000 each. Oh, let them have a good Christmas, you know. Oh, but we're going to get the $100,000 bonuses each. And, what's more is we're just going to shuffle a little bit of money into each one of our accounts or whatever. And they just able to do the paperwork the correct way so nobody's ever going to see it. They added on the tab basically to the bank, and they got all these everything. These bankers. This is why you see these bankers running around in their car that's like a BMW, and they got an Audi over here, and a BMW over here, and a Cadillac Escalade over here, and they're swimming in their big expensive swimming pool in their house in Beverly Hills or whatever. These are the bankers, you know. But they're going to go through that money that the government give them like hot cow poop through a tin horn. That's how they're going to go through the money, you know? And honest to Pete, this is the way it works. And so, but on the other side of this coin, look at how quick, if everything starts to fold in on itself, these banks are really nothing more than a hollow shell. They are only what you owe them. Their credits to all these banks, the credits that they use to pass the stress tests, are really debts owed to the bank. And so when the economy starts to turn down, the whole bunch of people in whatever country you're in, I don't care what country it is, all these people suddenly, it's either they're going to pay their bill to the bank this week, or they're going to eat, one of the two. They're going to decide to eat. And the bank's going to be waiting. And the bank can talk all about sending somebody out to get the bill collection agencies. Now, you guys know about them, right? They can talk all about that all they want. But if across the whole country they get down to the level the people do, where they're having a hard time putting food on the table, right now, all across Canada. Now, I can't speak for the United States, but I have a good idea what's going on in the United States as well. Because of basically I am constantly, every waking hour, practically, I am scanning the internet for articles and stuff so that I can keep ahead of what's happening in the economic situation. Honest to Pete, I have a good idea what's going on in the United States. People are quite literally using their credit cards, and in Canada too, they're using their credit cards to basically buying the necessities of life. They're not splurging with their credit cards. Their credit card bills are mounting up. An awful lot of people's credit card bills are mounting up slowly. And what they're doing is they're using them to buy Christmas dinner, stuff like that. They're buying little fire truck for the kid at Christmas because he ain't going to get that fire truck if that extra $100 doesn't go on the credit card. And their credit cards are getting maxed out now. The next step, all the way across the United States and Canada, the next step from this is that people are going to have to make a decision. Now, they're not there yet. They're making the minimum payments on their credit cards all across Canada and the United States. They're not quite there yet. They're meeting those minimum payments on the credit cards. But there's a time coming pretty soon as interest rates are going to go up. The credit card companies are going to come in and hit all these people, and we're talking about millions of people, with higher interest rates on their cards, right? And because interest rates are going up, there's going to come a point where the people are going to say, hey, you know what? I can either make this minimum payment on my credit card, or I can have dinner. Now, I don't care about the credit card collection agencies. That means nothing to me. And it's going to mean nothing to the people that are going to have to make the choice whether they're going to eat or pay off the credit card company. The credit card company is going to be sitting there and they're going to have to send out the collection agency. Not to the, right now, they've got these collection agencies here, there, and everywhere, right? And right now it's well and fine because they only have to send out the collection agency to one person out of 1,000. Or maybe a little bit more than that, but it's not substantially more than that. And the collection agencies are not cheap to the credit card companies. But when that number increases from one person in 1,000, up to 25% of the population needs the credit collection. The credit card companies, too, are connected to the banks. You see where I'm going with all this? And what's going to happen is the credit card collection agencies charge a lot. They can't afford to pay for 25% of the population to send credit card collection guys out there to people that are non-performing. And they're not allowed, in this modern day, they're not allowed to break your kneecaps anymore, like they used to be able to, or break your finger off. They're not allowed to do that anymore, right? That's not allowed to do that. But they're going to need credit card collection agencies for 25% of the population is not paying them back. Suddenly, you got really big, astronomically big banking gets connected into the banking industry just getting their money. Non-performing loans again, just like what hit Italy. There is a limit to how much that the government can actually go ahead and bail all these banks out when these banks get in trouble. And they are going to have to pass that limit at a certain point. When they start to pass that limit of how many banks that they can bail out, so in the next crisis, now we're going to discuss the bail-in for a minute, over the bailout. I know that they put the bail-in legislation in here in America, and here in Canada, and over in England, and over in all these countries. They put in bail-in legislation. That is a pleasant dream that the government has, that they're not going to have to foot the bill. That's a pleasant dream that they're having. That's like a guy that goes to a restaurant, you know, and he sits down for dinner and stuff, and he thinks to himself, oh, my girlfriend's going to pick up my tab. That's a pleasant dream until the waiter comes over and hands him the bill. And his girlfriend opens up and she says, I haven't got any money either. Right? This is the thing. It's a pleasant dream that they have. And I'll tell you why. Is because if they start to touch, and they learned this in Cyprus. They did that as a test case, Cyprus. They found out that people did a campaign called No! That's what the whole campaign was called. No! Don't touch our accounts! They were mad. And they were going to do a bank run. Bank runs were getting ready to start in Cyprus. They backed off. Why? Because it would be worse for them if they even tried to touch the people's money. It would be worse for them than anything that they could possibly ever think of doing. The big bank runs. People pull all the money out of the bank. Gone. They wouldn't have any money. If they try to touch 10% of the people's money, they won't have any money in any of the banks, and they know this. So this is a pipe dream, all this stuff about they're gonna take your money. And they can put in that legislation all they want. It ain't going nowhere. What's really going to happen is the government is going to have to bail them all out again. Either that or they're going to go under. The government can't let them go under. They don't call them too big to fail for nothing. The government's going to bail all of them out again. So what happens ultimately at the end of all this? In the end of all this, what happens is the government bails them all out again, and that puts pressure on the government's debt that they have sold out to you, the treasuries that the government has sold out. Suddenly, the government finds themselves much more in debt than they used to be. Take Italy, for example. They had the BARRD bail-in law in place and they decided, the European Central Bank decided, no more bailouts. We're only going to do bail-ins. We're only going to take the people's money. Do we all agree to this? All the banks. All the banks through the Eurozone. Do we all agree to this? That we are going to, no more bailouts. We're going to take the money from the people next time we have a banking crisis. And they all agree, yes, we all agree, right? So then what happened when it really come down to a banking crisis in Italy? Those banks in Italy were going to go under not long ago. Test case, they were going to go under. They remembered what happened in Cyprus, and they knew that they better not touch the people's money, and they didn't. When it come right down to nitty-gritty, push come to shove, the Italian government went another $20 billion in debt and bailed all those suckers out. And they all went out with that $20 billion. They probably only needed $2 billion, really. They got like $18 billion that they didn't know what to do with. They went out and got the jacuzzis for their house and the new Audi, and this is what they always do. The bankers. And they're out there right now splurging. Right now, as we talk, the Italian bankers are out there splurging on the Italian people's money, and the people are going to have to pay that back. And now the Italian government is that much more in debt. What are they going to have to do? Probably sell off Italian things that the Italian government actually owns, beautiful palaces or whatever, and to try to pay off this debt. Anyway, where we're going with this is the whole system is all done this way. And it can start to actually fold in on itself. And they can put in these laws, like I started originally this conversation, they can put these laws in to say, okay, we're not going to do on a market-to-market basis. But when it comes right down to it, the guy's like, where's my money? Just like that song, you know, where's my money? Where's my money? You know, when it comes right down to it, that's the way, and it all starts to fold in, because what is it actually worth? The bank has went out and they've said, okay, this is worth $1 million. But when the guy comes, I want my money, and they got to sell on a market-to-market basis, basically, because he wants his money now, and he's a big shot, it's all going to start to fold in on itself. It's basically a margin call, an enormous margin call. The whole system starts to fold in on itself. And they can't stop it once this gets going. The only thing that they can do is they're going to have to turn around, and they're going to have to turn around all their policies, because this is what's causing this to happen. It's getting ready to happen pretty soon. The whole thing's getting ready to fold up. And what's causing it to happen is the Fed is pulling out the liquidity that they put into the system after the 2008 crisis to stop all of this market-to-market and everything else. They put the laws in, but the laws didn't have any effect whatsoever. They quelled it, the 2008 crisis. It sucked up all of the liquidity they injected into it. They injected the liquidity not long before the final bottoming of the 2008 crisis, and it took it a few months to take hold and take effect, the liquidity that they injected a few months earlier. But after they injected it, it did quell the crisis, and everything started to come back up again. Liquidity is what solves it, and they can create liquidity. I argue in my mind sometimes that they didn't do enough. They didn't inject enough liquidity, and this is why we never had a real economic recovery after 2008. But if they had have injected more, they would have started a hyperinflation then. They just created enough liquidity. They were careful. They just created enough liquidity to get us out of the crisis, but not create a hyperinflation. And they put us into a period of stagflation, basically, that lasted from 2008 until now. And they can kid themselves all they want. They can say we had a recovery. We never had a recovery. We had stagflation for years. The economy bottom bounced and it's been stagnant. It's been a stagnant economy, and it hasn't changed. And they've been but now they're pulling that liquidity back. What do you think is going to happen? It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. The system is going to fold up into another 2008, except worse this time around, because there's more debt outstanding this time around in all the banking system. They're going to, in the end, have to turn around, bail out all the banks all over again, bail out all their banker buddies, and like I say, the banker buddies know this is coming, and they can't wait to buy that new jacuzzi, buy that new Lamborghini. They can't wait, right? When the Fed turns around on policy. But the Fed just can't go out and give them all this money right now for the banks, because if the Fed went out and gave them all this money right now for the banks, the people would squeal and say, what are you bailing them out for? They're not in trouble, right? They got to get in trouble first. See? So that's what the Fed's doing. The Fed's withdrawing the liquidity so that the banking system will get in trouble. And then when the banking system gets in trouble, you watch them scream to high heaven. It'll be all over the newspapers, all over the press. It'll be all over everything that the world is coming to an end and we need to bail out the banks again or the world's going to end. And then that'll give them the impetus to go ahead and set up a new program so that the banks will all get bailed out. They get to enrich their banker buddies all over again. They get to save the world, too, so they can stand up on a podium and have a medal put around their neck for saving the world. But this time's different. This time they're going to have to go overboard with it to the point where they're going to actually start to roll the dollar over, and the dollar's going to start to actually die. Because when people get to a certain point and they say, hey, you know what? My dollar's not buying anything anymore. I'm taking my dollars out of the bank and going to put it into something that's going to preserve its buying power. When the people all unanimously say that and they lose confidence in the dollar, that's when we get the hyperinflation. So this time, they're going to not get away. Like in 2008, they came close to getting their hyperinflation. So close it might have been scary if you had known how close that they actually came in 2008. And this is, people sense this. This is why there's a lot of guys on the YouTube, on the internet, talking hyperinflation, all kinds of stories. Remember, hyperinflation. And this is why you got tired of hearing about it. He's like, I don't want to hear about that hyperinflation anymore. I've heard it over and over and over again. Hyperinflation, hyperinflation. And we never had any hyperinflation. Yeah, that's because the Fed was riding that line. That stagflation line. That line between deflation and inflation. They were riding that line, and I must admit, it was like riding 12 seconds on a kicking, bucking bull. You know, a bull, like in a rodeo. And they were able to do it. They were able to hang on to that bull for the last number of years. But it's a difficult bull to ride. He can knock you off awful quick. And believe me, the Fed's going to get knocked off into inflation this time. There's no other way to go. They're going to get knocked off that bull. So listen, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe. And, oh, one other point I want to make. I got another channel. That's my news channel called the Delta Report. Just put in Delta Report on YouTube. Search engine will bring it right up. Head over there and subscribe. Listen, I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to try. I've started live broadcasts over there. Live broadcasts. You know? And I've done pre-recorded broadcasts on the live channel up until now, but I'm going to start doing live show so that I can actually see what you guys are. This is what I got on my mind to do, and I'm going to try to hit the supper hour all across the United States. You know, supper time news, like when you guys get home from work and stuff. You know, and you're able to open up the paper. You'll be able to turn on the YouTube, and I'll be on there reporting on the stories of the day, the biggest stories of the day, you know. Live stories. So listen, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe. Head over to my other channel and subscribe over there, too, if you haven't already. Really great channel, the Delta Report. Maybe I should put a link in the description. Bye-bye for now. Oh, and happy weekend, too. Have a good barbecue. This is springtime now. Bye-bye.